whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere Akine, the vaccine passport is set to be the hippest ticket in town. With a heads up, you'll need it to see those headline summer acts and go anywhere the in crowd is. The founder of Rhythm and Vines joins us live. Auckland's roadmap to level 2 is full of potholes for some businesses. We'll talk to them too. Kids could be back in class in the super city mid-October, so should teachers have to get the jab to protect students too young to be vaxxed? Covering the cost of political candidates hitting the campaign trail, the winners and losers in the latest MIQ lottery, and beam me up, Scotty, the real Captain Kirk is about to become the oldest man in space. Don't forget, you can check us out live on Facebook.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Good afternoon. I'm Anna Thomas. Vaccine certificates are to be used domestically and will be likely to be rolled out in November. Cabinet is now working to determine how widely they'll be used, and more information will be made available in a few weeks. Here's our political reporter Katie Scotcher.
Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says people will need to present a vaccine certificate to attend large-scale events like festivals. Officials are looking into how they could be used in the hospitality sector too. Ms Ardern says the certificates will not be required to access essential services like supermarkets. People will be able to print the vaccine certificate or download it on their phone.
Rhythm and Alps Festival Director Alex Turnbull says vaccine certificates are good news for his event.
Well, it's certainly encouraging. I mean, we're going to be supporting the government's decisions and of course we'll do anything it takes to keep the livelihood and the jobs going and the company at stake.
Alex Turnbull says he'll wait for more government advice before planning how to enforce the new rules. The police have decided to charge a 63-year-old man with organising a lockdown protest, but haven't said if it's Destiny Church leader Brian Tamaki. Mr Tamaki promoted and spoke at the protest at Auckland Domain on Saturday, attended by about 1,000 people. Police say a man has now been summoned to appear in the Auckland District Court next Tuesday in relation to organising the event. He will face COVID-19 charges. The police say the investigation is continuing and others at the event may also be charged. Mr Tamaki has been approached for comment. The Prime Minister says New Zealand could still have to revert to alert level restrictions if there's an outbreak of COVID variant that doesn't respond to the vaccine. The government's moving away from its elimination strategy towards relying on high vaccination rates with public health restrictions. The idea is to remove the need for disruptive, hard lockdowns. But Jacinda Ardern says that's in the context of a vaccine that provides a level of protection.
If we have an environment in the future where, heaven forbid, we have a form of COVID that does not respond to vaccines, then you need to revert to your alert level framework.
Under the first set of loosened restrictions from midnight tonight, Aucklanders will be able to connect with people outside their bubble, but it must be outdoors with no more than 2 households and 10 people mingling at a time. And 24 new community cases of COVID-19 have been reported today, 18 in Auckland and 6 in Waikato. The Justice Minister says any major changes to electoral laws are likely to be decided at a public referendum. A review will consider the voting age, overseas voting and length of the parliamentary term. The Minister, Chris Whawhoi, says some changes such as transparency of political funding and Māori voters' ability to switch from the Māori roll to the general roll could be in place before 2023. But he says major moves like increasing the parliamentary term to 4 years would be put to a referendum.
For some of these changes, we can make a decision to, if Parliament might agree to it in the next term, and then I guess depending on what recommendations come back and what decision the Cabinet makes once we get the recommendations back, some of these issues I think will probably need to go to a referendum, but these are things still to be worked out.
An independent review panel will report back by late 2023 with recommendations. It will also look at the funding of political parties. Facebook has apologised for the worldwide outage that left individuals and businesses without access to its platforms this morning. It says the outage also affected internal systems, meaning it was harder to figure out what was going on. Facebook, Instagram and WhatsApp are back online, but are being brought up to full capacity slowly. No user data was compromised. To sport, and New Zealand Rugby's making yet another attempt to get the Auckland-based provincial teams out of the city. Auckland, North Harbour and Counties Manukau have played just 2 games this season due to COVID-19 restrictions, and 2 previous applications to relocate the teams have been turned down. New Zealand Rugby's Steve Lancaster says time is running out for a decision from the Ministry of Health.
We're at a critical point really now where beyond this week it becomes incredibly challenging for the Auckland teams to be able to manage an adequate return to play period and then rejoin the competition. So yeah, we really need to know by the end of this week.
Meanwhile, the All Blacks will welcome back 4 senior players for their Northern tour, but are preparing to be without halfback Aaron Smith. Smith will remain in New Zealand for the birth of his 2nd child. And the All Blacks leave Queensland for the US in just under 2 weeks, with their match against the Americans on October the 24th. Warriors fullback Reece Walsh has been fined $5,000 and suspended for 2 games by the NRL after being arrested last week on the Gold Coast in possession of cocaine. The Warriors have said previously they'll also consider their own sanctions. Walsh also faces court charges. And the White Ferns all-rounder Anna Peterson has announced her retirement from international cricket. Peterson took the first T20 international hat-trick by a New Zealand woman against Australia in 2017. And that's the news.
Whether it's the carrot,
go away, go for a holiday, leave the Auckland boundary. If you're double vaccinated, move on with your life.
or the stick,
Particularly with our young people, if you can't go to a rugby match or you can't go to a concert unless you show that you've been vaxxed, that's going to be an incentive.
or a bad hair day.
We can't Uber a haircut, so just have to actually wait until it's safe enough again to open. People are becoming a little bit desperate.
Plenty of reasons to crop COVID. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service until midnight. Tomorrow for the North Island, fine spells and a few showers with possible thunderstorms and hail from Gisborne and Bay of Plenty to Manawatu. Easing this evening and mostly clearing tonight. Areas of low cloud or fog overnight, lifting tomorrow morning with scattered rain spreading south. Marlborough, Nelson, Buller, Westland and Fiordland, mostly cloudy with scattered showers. Rain tomorrow with some heavy falls and possible thunderstorms. Canterbury, North Otago and Dunedin, partly cloudy with showers inland this afternoon and evening. Drizzle and low cloud about the coast, spreading elsewhere tonight, then clearing tomorrow morning. Scattered rain tomorrow afternoon or evening. Central Otago, Clutha and Southland, cloudy periods. A few showers during the afternoons and evenings, both today and tomorrow, with possible thunderstorms and hail. And for the Chatham Islands, partly cloudy. RNZ National, it is 5:07 and you're with Checkpoint and Lisa Owen.
Nā mihi, Anna. Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Is the ticket to that summer festival, big bar or maybe even a wedding, the proof of vaccine you may need this summer, a pass to party? All it will cost you is 2 doses of the Pfizer vaccine in your arm. The number of Delta cases remains stubbornly high, with 24 new infections in the community today, 6 in Waikato, the rest in Auckland, plus a warning. Based on the spread, authorities are expecting about 50 more cases in the coming days. And today the government's unveiled its plan for vaccine certificates, saying you will need one to get into festivals and maybe even some hospitality venues. Katie Doyle reports.
Sunscreen, tent, face glitter, festival ticket, and now proof of vaccination.
This is a warning to you, or a heads up, as it were. Go out and get vaccinated now, because you will need that vaccination certificate to be a part of that large-scale event.
Yes, today the Prime Minister announced the creation of the long-anticipated vaccine certificates. Details of their use remain light, but they will likely be introduced in November.
We will use them as a tool to lessen the risk in what are currently considered high-risk settings, including large-scale events. We are also consulting on their use in places like hospitality.
Jacinda Ardern says you won't need them to access essential services like the supermarket and healthcare.
The certificate will take the form of a physical document that you can download and print or carry in digital form on your phone. And finally, we'll release the detail of the framework in advance of it taking effect, so people will have time to prepare.
So how will it work? Well, first things first, you'll need to get a Real Me or a My Health account. The Ministry of Health's Shane Hunter says the certificates will then be available on My COVID Record.
You can download that certificate, as was mentioned before. You can print that or carry it in a digital form. You'll present it. We are building a little app that will actually verify it, so that's to make sure that it hasn't been, fraudulently created. So that will actually be part of what we're delivering. That will essentially confirm that it's a valid certificate, and you'll get the tick and away you go.
But access to your vaccination certificate isn't going to happen straight away.
Just to let you know the phases that we intend to roll this out. So firstly, we will be making available soon access to your COVID vaccination record. Within a few weeks of that, so late this month, we intend to make test results accessible via My COVID Record. And then through November, we will be making the vaccination certificates that the Prime Minister referred to accessible in downloadable form.
Today, the Prime Minister also issued a big plea to the unvaccinated.
I want everyone to be able to satisfy themselves that the vaccine is safe, but I want them to do that now, because the impact of waiting is just too great. Waiting puts people at risk. It also makes it harder for those parts of our lives that during COVID have been considered higher risk to come back to life.
With Christmas and summer fast approaching, there's no time like the present.
So you will need a vaccine certificate to get into big music festivals this summer. Hamish Pinkham is the founder and director of Rhythm and Vines, which runs for 3 days in Gisborne. And Hamish joins me now. Hamish, how does this change things for you guys?
Well, it's certainly a positive step in the right direction to getting back to live events, isn't it? And we've been in some holding pattern the last few weeks until we got a bit of clarity on how the future looks. But I think today we got a bit of a green light to say, look, we want to get back to level one. Here's some of the requirements that are going to be needed for guests attending events like Rhythm and Vines. And as promoters, we can start now to work towards running safe and secure events within the pandemic.
Does it make life easier for you?
Oh, it's certainly, certainly a bit of a relief that we've got some direction, and all we've wanted to do is run, the best events we can. We've been waiting for, a little bit of direction, and I think we've got that. We can begin to start to implement some of the direction we've got today. There'll be certainly a lot to work through with how the passport will be activated, how we'll work with those that won't be vaccinated, and ensuring that all punters, all artists, all staff, everyone involved with the festival is on board with this policy that the government is now implying.
So what is your position at Rhythm and Vines? Do you just want vaccinated people? Is that your position regardless of the government's stance?
I think it's not up to us to set the health policy, is it, for the country? So as a wider industry, we've been waiting for some direction from government. And I think we saw that today. Now we can just get on and, work around and help support, I think, some of the initiatives that the government are now starting to implement. And all we want to do is be able to run our events, and all our punters want to do is be able to gather at places like Rhythm and Vines this summer. And I think, as we've seen today, there's some impotence, isn't there, to get vaccinated, to get onto it early, and ensure that we can all gather safely this New Year's.
How do you reckon you're going to police this?
There's certainly a lot to work through, and we're just catching up on the news today. So, as we know, there's going to be it's going to be linked, isn't it, to some of your health records, and ensure that you are, you have got the vaccine for a start. But those are the kind of things we'll be looking to work together as an industry to help support the government initiative going forward.
Given that the Prime Minister has indicated that they're going to give a clear mandate, right, on which events require vaccination or not, and you guys sell tickets months in advance, this is going to be a gate check for you, isn't it?
Yeah, we need it to be as seamless as possible. We need it to be, click and collect at the gate. We need to know who's on board with the mandate and who's not. It can't be complicated. People are there to enjoy themselves within the health guidelines, aren't they? So we can't We can't overcomplicate things, but we need it to be secure. We need to follow the process that will be rolled out in the coming weeks. So, yeah, we're looking forward to more clarity on exactly how it will be implemented, and we can work our event around it.
Hamish, what do you reckon the top two things you require still from the government in terms of clarity around this? What do you need to know?
We need some assurity to be ready in time for our event, I think. There's talk of this rollout in the coming weeks. We're in October now, and, for us specifically, Rhythm and Vines is not a small project to pull together. So, yeah, some assurity, some insurance on how and when it will be, implemented, some technology we can all support, I think, and just some clarity that, the summer festival season will be protected. But, we've had a lot of positive chat in the last few weeks, haven't we? We've seen focus from the government to ensure that we all get a summer of festivities. So just, insurance that it will happen in time for our events and other events this summer is something that we're all looking for.
Your other issue, though, Hamish, isn't it levels, right? Alert levels. We've had some epidemiologists casting doubt on whether we can get to level 1 by Christmas, and we've got persistent numbers of Delta cases, fresh outbreak in Waikato. Auckland is still, uncertain future. How confident are you that you're going to get to level 1? Because you need it, don't you?
Yeah, it has been a waiting game, and I think today was a positive step. We've really got to just work within the environment. I mean, we're working in a pandemic, aren't we? There's certainly a lot of hurdles, and events are just one small part of the ecosystem that we're trying to get back to level 1. But
how long can you leave it, Hamish? How late can you leave that decision? You're waiting for level 1. You can't have a festival without it. Where is your cut-off point to know that you're going to get there?
I think we'll be having some pretty strong conversations towards the end of November, months out from our event. But, we've got confidence from some of the news today. There's certainly a lot of interest from our punters to make it happen. The government want to make it happen. So we've just got to take each week as it comes. And, getting vaccinated is going to be a big part of that. So we're encouraging our punters to get on board. And, we won't be able to attend those kind of events without being vaccinated. So let's get on with it.
Couple of quick things. Will you give refunds to those people who bought tickets before this policy came in if they don't want to get the jab?
Certainly we will. We won't be in a position to host people that are unvaccinated from the news today. So we'll be, sure to honour those that won't be able to join us.
Okay. What about acts? Those people performing, are you going to require them to be vaccinated too, even if the government doesn't?
Yeah, from what we took from the news today, anyone involved with the mass events, from staff to artists to punters, will need to be vaccinated to attend these kind of gatherings this summer.
Also, just across the board, because you're involved in other events, how are you going with your lineup and MIQ?
Yeah, that's another big challenge for a lot of industries at the moment. And, we're talking to a handful of acts that are committed to join us, and we're working through the ballot process like a lot of industries and like a lot of Kiwis returning. And it's certainly been a challenge, but, we've got a bit of time on our side, and we're just taking a ticket like everyone else and working through the best way to attract a handful of international acts. But in the meantime, we're lucky we've sold out in advance. Punters are looking forward to joining us. We've got a wide range of Kiwi acts that will be joining us, and I think everyone will be just relieved to get together within whatever environment we can come New Year's and celebrate what's been a pretty roller coaster 2021.
Hamish, just to be clear, are you in the MIQ lobby with every other punter trying to get a spot for the international acts, or are you vying through some other means to get them through MIQ, e.g. an economic exemption of some sort?
We don't have any shortfalls at this stage, but there's certainly a number of conversations taking place within our industry to try and ensure some spots to provide the entertainment this summer. But currently we've taken the ticket like a lot of industries, and it'd be good to see a little bit more focus for our industry to invite some of these international guests to join us. But, artists are just one part of Rhythm and Vines, and I think, if it's international acts, if it's Kiwi acts, whoever will be entertaining us will be well received by our crowd.
Appreciate your time this evening. That's Hamish Pinkham, who's the founder and director of Rhythm and Vines there. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback. Nō reira anei na kaupapa mō te hōtaka nei. What do you make of the idea of a vaccination passport? Will you get the jab in order to go to some of these big events? We're talking about concerts there, but we're assuming, because the Prime Minister says it applies to big crowd events, that could mean if you want to go to the rugby, the cricket or any other activity where you're cheek to jowl with other people, you're going to need this. So pātui mai, text us 2101, tweet us at checkpointrnz or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is 19 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Kia ora rawatu mo te whakarongo mai e haere ake nei. Coming up, the latest MIQ voucher lottery. No vax, no service. Auckland city businesses are calling on people to get themselves vaccinated so people can shop, dine and party without fear. They're waiting on vaccination levels to boost so the city can take steps forward on the roadmap out of alert level 3. And when things do return, some won't be happy serving people who are not vaccinated. Reporter Louise Tanuth and camera operator Marika Habazi have the story.
Here in Tāmaki Makaurau, it could be weeks or even months before businesses can reopen their doors and get back to business as usual as we wait for those higher vaccination rates. We've been speaking to some of them today to see how they're faring and what their message is for people.
Hi, I'm Krish. I'm director of the Comensa Group with Cafe Hanoi, Susu Dumpling Bar, San and Ghost Street. We're in Auckland CBD. We are desperate to get our staff back to work. We just miss everybody. It's not about just getting a vaccination for your friends or your family, your whānau. It's now also about livelihoods and saving jobs, because this is what we are facing in our industry, is a serious disruption without the vaccination rates being up as high as they need to be. We feel very strongly about our responsibility as directors to protect our staff as well as our customers. We live with Health and Safety and Food Safety Act every day that we open for business anyway. This is an extension of that, and it's just so super important that everybody understands that we value the health of our staff and our customers, and without those vaccination rates being up high, we can't do that. We can't operate.
I'm Richard Hanson. We've got Aotea Gifts, retail stores for travellers right throughout the country, and we've been closed the majority of our customers since March last year, and slowly looking to see a possibility of recovery into next year and people coming back, but it's all on the back of vaccinations. And with vaccinations, we can plan for our lives, our jobs, employ people, and keep things going. Without vaccinations, we're not going to be having people coming in and out of the country. There's a lot of things that are based on that, and we've got to, in order to keep some of the stores running, we've got to focus on keeping going and marshalling out whatever money that we've got to keep going in the future. We've been running 18 months. At 90% down, and that just can't go on forever.
Hi, Tricky Hartley, owner of the Conservatory. This lockdown's certainly been a lot more detrimental to our industry than the previous lockdown, especially considering our industry in Auckland employs 50,000 people, and we're a $12 billion industry, and this is decimating businesses left, right and centre. I agree with that. I think any way that we can get people back into the businesses and, people socialising again in bars and restaurants around Auckland, the better. So the quicker we hit that target, the better it is for the industries and employers and employees.
Viv Beck from Heart of the City says it's clear vaccinations are crucial for businesses to operate.
The reality is that people are concerned about their staff, their customers coming into the store, suppliers coming into the store, and they really are starting to think what action they need to take.
That's why they're calling for guidance on how businesses can enforce these rules.
The reality is that there are sort of legal ramifications of everybody making their own risk-based assessment. So we're looking for guidelines from the government on this. I think it's essential because it's a stress that businesses don't need. They need to know what the guidelines are, and then they can make their decisions.
And if you're listening to that on radio, we'll put the video from Louise and Marika up on our Facebook page. Now, one Wellington venue owner is pushing to save brunches, dinners out and date nights by encouraging both staff and customers to get jabbed. Hospitality group Pereta runs 35 venues and employs 800 people across Wellington, the Hutt Valley and Waikato. CEO Jamie Williams called it the Take Two for the Team campaign. He joins me now from one of his venues on Wellington's waterfront. Tēnā koe, Jamie. How are you incentivising staff to go out and get themselves vaccinated?
Oh, tēnā koe. Well, the first thing we're doing is to try to make it easy for them. So, if they need to go during work hours, then we'll pay them to go. And then the second thing we're doing is we're giving them a $25 food voucher for each jab that they get. So a total of 50, and then we're incentivising each venue that they'll get a $500 contribution towards a team day out where they can go and play mini golf or paintball or anything like that once they've got their vaccination rate up to 90% in their venue.
So, just to be clear, Jamie, if the particular venue, like one particular bar, once they get to 90% vaccinated within staff, you'll kick in $500 for them to go do something fun. Yeah,
we're trying to put the carrot out there, I guess, and avoid sticks, I guess, is probably our philosophy. So let's encourage them to do it.
And what kind of reaction have you had from staff?
Yeah, we haven't had any negative reaction. I think that's the positive thing, is that, if anything, our staff being a younger cohort are probably just a little bit guilty of, I'll get around to it when I get around to it. So what we're trying to do is show them that if we're going to encourage the public to do it, and then we need to play our part as well. So it's about kind of everyone doing their bit.
So those are the people working on your team. What about customers? Are you doing anything to encourage them as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got posters in each venue that will show the local vaccination rate, so whether it's the Hamilton one or Wellington, in terms of how many people in the population have had the first dose versus the second dose. And we are encouraging them at the tables to use a QR code to scan through and book their vaccination if they haven't already. And then we're trying to remind them really around that they can save jobs. And it was interesting to hear some of the Auckland operators talking about that. I don't know anyone in our industry at that moment that is actually trying to make money. This is about standing up long enough to get to the other side and maintaining a workforce that can help you deliver hospitality. So all we're really trying to do at the moment is show the public that if they can get vaccinated, they're going to save jobs in our sector, and they're not going to miss out on the social connection stuff. So we're trying to make it a little bit more emotive by connecting it to date night or things that people miss in lockdown. Going brunch with the girls or beers with the boys or going out for dinner. The bits that, the social connection.
So Jamie, at the moment, this is really about survival.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Level 2 is not profitable. It's sort of break even if you're lucky. So really it's about us all just sort of trying to get to the end. And we don't know when that'll be, obviously, but stand there long enough and you've got a chance. And we've already seen, obviously, up in Auckland, some people this week in terms of venues that couldn't quite make it.
Hey Jamie, today the government has revealed some of the details around this vaccination passport, and they say that it's going to be for large events, large venues, and they haven't made a decision on hospitality. Do you want people to have to show their vaccine passport to get into hospitality venues? Are you for it or against it?
Look, what I'm for is actually consistent rules. I think there's a risk that you'll confuse the customer and confuse the staff in different venues if you have an optional space where a business can choose. I think, if someone goes to a cafe down the road and they have to show it, and then they go to another cafe down the road and they don't have to show it, it just creates awkward moments. I think it lacks clarity. So I think if there's a rule where you either do it or you don't, that's what we're after. We want a consistency that we can all apply as a sector rather than different rules being applied venue by venue.
Kia ora, Jamie. Thank you for joining us. That is Jamie Williams, who is, he's part of this campaign, Take Two for the Team. They're trying to incentivise hospitality staff, giving them $25 for every jab that they get. And once each venue has staff over 90%, they get $500 to spend on doing something fun. It is 28 minutes past 5. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You are listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. A sweeping review of electoral laws will look into whether the political donation scheme should be scrapped and public money should be used to bankroll political parties. Also under consideration is the length of the parliamentary term, the voting age and getting rid of the so-called coat-tailing rule. Our political reporter Annika Smith has more.
Political funding was again thrust into the spotlight last year after the Serious Fraud Office began digging into political donations. Now there are 3 sets of charges before the courts, with cases linked to National, Labour and New Zealand First. How to best fund political parties is just one of many changes now up for discussion. Justice Minister Chris Farfoy says the laws barely changed since the 1950s.
The basic structure of the Act is 60 years old, when voting was based on walking to your local polling station and filling out a piece of paper on election day itself.
State funding parties to avoid any election donations shenanigans is one option on the table.
The review's terms of reference will cover how political parties are financed, including whether or not there might be state funding for candidates and political parties.
But no crucial details at this stage, like work on estimates as to how much it would cost taxpayers.
No, I haven't, and that's why I think it's important to get the public opinion about whether that's a flyer or not. If it's not, then I don't think it will be proceeded.
ACT leader David Seymour says a move to state funding would be undemocratic.
Democracy is about people sending representatives to Wellington to hold the Crown accountable. If the Crown is also funding the representatives, then it's a closed shop for insiders and it's no longer democratic.
The one-seat rule, or coat-tailing, is another controversial part of the law, where a party can get into Parliament by securing an electorate seat without reaching the 5% threshold. If their party vote is high enough, they can also bring in other MPs. In 2013, then Justice Minister and National MP Judith Collins refused to progress Electoral Commission recommendations to drop the one-seat rule and lower the threshold from 5 to 4%. She was asked today whether politicians can be trusted to make decisions about the laws under which they are elected.
Our government was a minority government working in coalition. We did not have a 75% majority in Parliament. We always adopted the view that electoral law reform should have a consensus of Parliament. We could not get a consensus of Parliament.
The Greens say the work's already being done, and MP Golriz Garaman wants all of the 2012 recommendations adopted immediately.
Yes, it's a good idea to have an independent review of democracy because political parties already in Parliament and government have a vested interest in maintaining the status quo rules. But we also need that review to result in actual change, and we need to see this minister commit now.
Chris Farfoy says the government will be strongly guided by the public feedback.
A public conversation should lead any changes.
There are some things firmly off the table, namely a return to first past the post and becoming a republic. There are also some changes that could be in place by 2023, including making it easier for Māori voters to change between the Māori and general electoral roll and more transparency in the donations regime. Any bigger reforms would first go to referendum and would be unlikely to be in place for several years yet. A review panel will now be established to report back by late 2023 with recommendations for change.
Homai o whakaaro, I know you have a lot to say on that one. Hey, would you be happy to fund political parties' election campaigns? And how long do you think the term should be? Is 3 years long enough? You want it longer? Do you want it shorter? Let us know. Text us on 2101 and tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. A lot of you getting in touch about the vaccine certificate. This person says, my health records are private. Goodbye, Rhythm and Vines. But the majority of you reckon this is a good idea. We've had enough carrots, this listener says. Vaccine certificate for entry is the stick. Kevin says the doubters need to stop being selfish. Get the jab now. The science is strong enough for all intelligent people to realise life is a risk, measure the risk and move forward. And on the Rhythm and Vines founder, this is Hamish. This person says, how lovely to hear the understanding and reasonable attitude of the Rhythm and Vines person describing his response to the government's announcement of vaccination certificates. Such a refreshing change from the whingers. And this one from Don, great idea, great timing, gives people time to make the choice for summer, and I will go to the restaurant where entry and working there requires a vaccine passport. Keep it coming. Text us on 2101. Kia ora, e te iwi e haere ake nei I a Checkpoint, the winners and losers from today's MIQ lottery. Should vaccination be mandatory for teachers? And Captain Kirk, the real one, gets ready to blast into space. It is time now for the headlines. Anna Thomas, mina pita pita kōrero.
Thanks, Lisa. The government's introduction of vaccination certificates has been welcomed by the events industry. The certificates will likely be rolled out in November, with the Prime Minister warning people with tickets to large summer events they will need to get vaccinated or they won't be able to get in. The founder and director of Gisborne Music Festival Rhythm and Vines, Hamish Pinkham, has told Checkpoint the industry had been in a holding pattern for the last few weeks. He says promoters still need details on how the certificates will be implemented and managed, but they can now plan for the events to go ahead. Hamish Pinkham says people who choose not to get vaccinated will be refunded. The National Party, however, says the government should have informed the public much earlier in the year it would introduce the certificate. COVID-19 spokesperson Chris Bishop says other countries have been rolling out similar programs all year, and New Zealanders have been given just a month to get used to the idea. The police have not said if Destiny Church leader Brian Tamaki is the man they've summoned to court to face charges for organising a lockdown protest at the weekend. Mr Tamaki promoted and spoke at the Auckland Domain protest, which was attended by about 1,000 people. Police say a 63-year-old man will face COVID-19 charges in the Auckland District Court next Tuesday, while others may also be charged. Facebook says no user data was compromised during a worldwide outage this morning that left individuals and businesses without access to its platforms. Facebook, Instagram and WhatsApp are back online but are being brought up to full capacity slowly. And the New South Wales Premier, Dominic Pereta, says he intends to stick with October the 11th as the date to ease COVID restrictions in the state. Mr Pereta was elected as leader of the state's Liberal Party this morning, succeeding Gladys Berejiklian, who surprisingly resigned last Friday. And that's the news.
Thanks, Anna. No mai hoki mai. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Ko taku hoa e nai nei, ko Nicholas Poynton, who joins us from our Auckland newsroom to talk business. Let's start with Infratil. Well, it's the second splash in as many days.
Yeah.
Nicholas, what's going on?
Yeah, well, yesterday they were biomedical diagnostics firms and today it's data centres. The company announced this morning they're spending up to $250 million to take up to a 40% stake in KO Data. That's a British firm that owns 3 data centres in the country. And Infratil says global demand for connectivity and data continues to rise, and these critical pieces of digital infrastructure will only become more important in the future, making it, in its view, a very attractive investment. The centres that KO Data owns are between Cambridge and London, otherwise known as the Innovation Corridor, as it's home to a number of technology and bioscience companies in the region. And what I thought was kind of really interesting about this announcement today was some of the other sort of blue chip type of investors that Infratil has got on board with this announcement, with this investment. One of them has $1 trillion worth of assets under management, and it became quite clear that the attraction to having Infratil come on board was its experience and understanding it has in the telecommunications sector. This is a company that owns a significant stake in Vodafone. It also owns CDC data centres based in Canberra. There was a view that this company, that Infratil, does have expertise and knows how to grow these sorts of companies over time. And Infratil and these other investors' sort of long-term or medium-term plan with this new data centre business is to make it worth nearly $1 billion in the medium term. So investors, they really liked what they saw today. That's investors in Infratil. Share price up 1% to $8.33.
Now, Nicholas, car sale figures, right? The double cab ute is usually a favourite. So what can you tell us about EVs?
Well, yeah, new car sales. Let's start with the headline figures. They rebounded sharply last month. They did suffer a bit of a dip in August, but sales were up a whopping 51% last year on last year in September. What was surprising, though, that strong growth we've seen in electric vehicle sales. Now, the number one selling car last month was, surprise, surprise, the Ford Ranger. Our country's love affair with the double cab ute does rage on, but what was a real surprise was that the number two sold vehicle last month was the Tesla Model 3. And bear in mind, these are not cheap vehicles.
Yeah, how much, Nicholas? Come on.
Oh, look, I had a bit of a scrounge around on TradeMe. There's obviously very different models. I'm afraid I might say something and get absolutely roasted for it, but I think they started around $70,000 to $80,000. That's just my kind of cursory glance.
A quick spot.
Quick spot, but definitely not cheap. Not a cheap vehicle. And what was interesting was that this is the first time a battery-powered vehicle has been in the top 3 model registrations in any month. EV sales are up sharply, accounting for now 1 in 5 of all vehicles sold. And look, we could possibly put this down to a range of factors. Things like the Clean Car Standard, increasing investment in EV infrastructure, seen a number of firms announcing plans in that respect. Maybe we have more climate-conscious consumers, and also fuel prices at the pump not as cheap as they used to be either. So look, it's going to be really interesting to see if this trend continues, especially for a car that does come with a sort of a premium price point. Bit of alliteration there.
Okay, let's chuck it into second gear and take a spin around the market.
NZX, it's down 1% or 137 points to 13,337. The dollar is trading at 69.4 US cents and 95.5 Australian.
Thanks, Nicholas. Nicholas Poynton with Business News. Facebook, Instagram, Messenger and WhatsApp are back in operation after a 6-hour outage that kept more than 3 billion users from their services. Shares in Facebook closed down almost 5%. Facebook has apologised but has not explained the failure. The BBC's David Willis has more from Los Angeles.
Facebook issued a statement apologising for the outage and saying, "We've been working hard to restore access to our apps and services and are happy to report that they are coming back online." And earlier, the company's chief technology officer, Mike Schwofer, said the company was experiencing what he called network issues, but he didn't say what those networking issues actually were. And so far, there's been no official reason given for the outage, although there is some speculation that it could have involved an error with what's known as domain name systems. That's the system that points web browsers to the computer system serving the website that the person is looking for. Now, I think an outage of this kind shows, amongst other things, just how much of the internet Facebook actually owns and how much the world has come to rely on its platforms to run businesses, to connect with online communities, to log on to other websites, even to order food in some cases. And this will have cost Facebook in terms of online advertising revenue, but I think probably the greatest disruption as far as users are concerned was to those who use WhatsApp as their primary form of remote communication. As one analyst here put it, for people all over the world who use WhatsApp in that way, today's outage was a bit like taking away their telephones.
You've got a lot of views on this idea of a vaccine passport, so let's get to some of them. This listener says, as a New Zealander living in Switzerland, I continue to be surprised at the New Zealand government's slow pace. Vaccination was rolled out here in April, vaccination certificates on a phone app from around June. Why are things so slow at home? And someone else says, hi Lisa, of bloody course I'd get a vaccination if I wanted to go to an event. Why not? When A, it protects me, B, it protects everyone else, and C, it protects hospitals and their ICU staff, etc. Why would people not? Followed by about 5 question marks. Another person says Turkey has a very simple system for entry into crowded places. I was there in January. The government issues you a specific QR code linked to your passport or national ID. You present it for scanning at the point of entry, for example, a mall entrance, which is manned by police. Zero non-tolerance, very easy and quick. Another shout out to Hamish from Rhythm and Vines. This person says, so refreshing to hear someone being positive and pragmatic about the challenges of operating in a COVID environment instead of just whinging. Great. This is our new reality, so let's just get on with it. And another listener reckons the vaccine certificate should apply to most venues, including cafes and restaurants. It would absolutely compel the young people to get vaccinated. Also sports games, they say. Great move from the government. Could push us closer to 90%. And Max from Dunedin's got in touch. Max says the carrot-stick dichotomy is far too binary. There is a third way. Hit them with the carrot. Just a note, Checkpoint does not condone violence of any sort. Do keep texting us 2101 and you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. 25,000 New Zealanders around the world entered the lobby today, desperately trying to get a space in MIQ in a bid to return home. It was the third release of the MIQ virtual lobby system, with around 3,700 rooms released. But for many it was yet another blow. Samantha G reports.
Auckland woman Roshni Same has been trying to get a spot in managed isolation for her husband, so he can return to New Zealand for the birth of their first child. She is 29 weeks pregnant and has had extenuating circumstances throughout her pregnancy. But her husband Walt, who is in Tennessee with his family, has been rejected for an emergency space in MIQ. The couple have appealed that decision in the High Court.
We expected that 4 or 5 months would be enough time to go through the old MIQ system to get a place, but then everything was scrapped and now we're just in a lottery with everyone else, and it's becoming very desperate for us, and we're both extremely worried.
They were 24,237th in the queue when the rooms opened at midday, missing out on a space yet again.
The government has really let us down on this side of things. They obviously just didn't think about women or women's health when they set up the MIQ emergency classifications. It's totally gender blind and it's totally unfriendly to families as well. I feel for everybody.
Speaking from Hong Kong, Martin Newell, who is part of the Grounded Kiwis group that is working to support hundreds of New Zealanders stuck overseas, says there were tears of joy and tears of sadness from those vying for a spot in MIQ today.
We've had stories from sisters that need to say goodbye to their other sisters on the other side of the world. We've had stories of pregnant women that need to come home for medically essential reasons to give birth. We've had people in America that overstaying their visa and risk detention because the New Zealand government won't provide them a spot in the MIQ system. People are desperate and the system is broken and it needs to be fixed.
He says New Zealanders trying to get home were frustrated, exhausted, angry and desperate. Last week, almost 23,000 people signed a petition urging the government to create a fairer managed isolation system.
The booking system is unfair. The system doesn't have enough supply and it doesn't account for fully vaccinated travellers.
Tauranga woman Caroline Salisbury was also devastated to miss out on a spot. She is waiting in Queensland for a chance to come home after going to visit her son following the deaths of both her parents. She flew to Australia on the day Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern announced the Trans-Tasman bubble was put on hold and has been unable to return since.
It's quite distressing. And very unsettling. You sort of wait for it, you build up waiting for it on Sunday and Monday, thinking, will I be lucky this time? What's my plan? You check through all the flights. what flights are available. I could do this, I could do that.
On her third attempt at booking a spot today, she started out at 17,959 in the queue.
To me, home isolation is the answer to all this. Trust people, or don't even trust us. Break anklets on us. Use voice recognition or photo recognition software. It's not that hard. Countries everywhere are doing home isolation. It's done here in Australia.
She says the system desperately needs to change.
It is 13 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Hei muriaki ina pita kōrero. After the news at 6, what the extra alert level steps mean for Auckland businesses hanging in there for better times, and level 2. Unvaccinated teachers across the country could soon face tougher COVID-19 restrictions. Yesterday on the program, Education Minister Chris Hipkins wouldn't say whether vaccination for school teachers would be mandatory, but signalled tougher rules will be introduced for those who haven't yet received a jab. But with Auckland schools provisionally set to reopen at the end of the school holidays, what do those in the sector plan to do to keep staff and students safe? The President of the New Zealand Educational Institute, Liam Rutherford, joins me now. Kia ora, Liam. Why shouldn't it be mandatory for teachers to get vaccinated unless they have a medical reason to be exempted?
Tēnā koe, Lisa. I think the strength of what the education sector has done all throughout COVID is not looked to politicise the approach that the government's been taking, but instead leaving the public health experts to work out actually what is the best way to be keeping students, staff and the community safe. And so to that end, we're just happy to leave it to them and sit back and wait to see whether or not mandatory vaccines are the way to go.
Would you support the government if they were to make that move?
Well, we've been consistent the whole way through that we will support the public health advice. And so if that is what the experts reckon is where we need to go, then we'll fall in behind that.
Haven't they made that clear already, though? And so why are you sitting on the fence on it?
No, they haven't come out and said that vaccines need to be mandated in education.
No, but they have said that is the way out of lockdowns and that it is the best health response and it's the best in terms of keeping people safe. So that's a pretty clear message. So why are you still on the fence about whether teachers should have to have vaccinations?
The advice at this stage is that everybody should go out and get vaccinated, and that's 100% the right move, and that's what we've been encouraging members to do. Talk of vaccine mandates hasn't come to light yet, and so we're not calling for that either.
Do you think teachers would resist that? I mean, what kind of vaccination rates do you have so far?
We don't get information as to how occupations track. At the same time, we know the overwhelming majority of people are vaccinated or on the way to getting vaccinated. But at the same time, like every profession, there will be a small percentage of educators that haven't or won't.
Yeah, so Liam, have you not surveyed your members out of curiosity?
No, we haven't surveyed members directly about that, but obviously it's a very live conversation within the sector, and so we do.
Are you going to?
No, not at this stage. We aren't planning to. We're talking to our members all the time, and apart from that, we're just willing to work with the public health experts around what's the best way to keep the education sector safe.
Yeah, because there are, these are kids. The kids we're talking about here, primary age kids, they can't get vaccinated, right? So what is the duty of care to them? By adults getting vaccinated, they are safer. And the adults that are with them in a classroom, in a confined space, are teachers. So how do you reconcile that situation?
Oh, we're encouraging all educators and all New Zealanders to get out there and get vaccinated. I mean, both the Ministry and the government have been really clear about that, and we think that's 100% the right thing to do.
Have you had any conversations about a testing regime?
No, it has been flagged that a testing regime is one of the tools that they're going to be looking at, and so we'll be really interested to better understand what the details of that are going to look like.
So would you be happy for teachers to have daily tests?
We'll leave that back to the public health experts to set out what the precautions would need to be in place. I mean, the strength of what the education sector has done up until now is not second-guess the information that's coming out from the public health experts, and so we'll just continue to take that line.
Time's running out though, isn't it, Liam? Because, we're talking about potentially kids being back at school on the 18th of October and logistically some of the things being looked at, while they could be take a bit of time to put in place. So when do you reckon these conversations are going to happen?
We don't have a flag around when they are going to happen. I think the most important thing we can do now is to be consistently telling people to go out and get vaccinated. It's the safest thing we can do to respond to COVID right now.
Appreciate your time this evening. That is Liam Rutherford, who's the president of the NZEI. Let us know your thoughts on that. Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. So teachers have to be vaccinated to be in the classroom with kids. Dominic Pereta has been sworn in as the new Premier of New South Wales this afternoon after a resounding win in a secret party ballot this morning.
I, Dominic Francis Pereta, do swear that I'll perform the functions and duties of Premier of New South Wales faithfully to the best of my ability. So help me God.
The 39-year-old former Treasurer said his leadership marked a new chapter for the state and he would focus on infrastructure and family. He has stepped into the breach created by Gladys Berejiklian's shock resignation on Friday. Here's the ABC's David Lipson.
A big day for the 39-year-old father of 6, Dominic Pereta, a job he's wanted from a very young age. He's clearly thrilled and promised to serve every single person across the state.
It is the greatest privilege of my life to represent and serve every one of you. I know how big the challenge ahead is for our state, but I love New South Wales, and that is the passion that will fuel me and fuel my team. A stable, united government is vital to getting on with the work that we've begun, so there'll be no cabinet reshuffle until we are through this challenge.
He also had some kind words for his predecessor, Gladys Berejiklian, who has resigned, of course, under that Independent Commission Against Corruption cloud. Here's what Mr Pereta had to say.
Everyone would agree that her hard work, tireless dedication and total commitment to her job was second to none. She's been an inspiring role model for many, especially women and migrant communities. And that's just one of the reasons why I believe there has been such an outpouring of support over the last few days.
He certainly does have a big task ahead of him. With the state set to start reopening on Monday, we could see a surge in hospital cases in New South Wales from COVID in a system that's already stretched. Mr Pereta will have to navigate that without 3 of the most experienced members of the government, Gladys Berejiklian, John Barilaro and Andrew Constance, who have all stepped down. He's also got to build trust with the public and renegotiate deals with the crossbenchers in his minority government. And then there's 3 by-elections to come at least. On the other hand, he takes the reins at a politically convenient time in some ways. With the hard work of lockdown almost over, he gets to push his anti-lockdown stance at a time when it's relatively safe in a health sense to do so. It does look very much like his colleagues are fully behind him, certainly for now. Rob Stokes, who challenged him in that special party room meeting, spoke on the way out.
Dom Pereta will be a magnificent Premier and he has my undivided loyalty and support, and I will use every ounce of strength in my body to make sure that he is re-elected as Premier of New South Wales when we go to the polls in 2023.
Well, let's get to some of your feedback on the vaccine certificate. It's still flooding in. This person says, absolutely great to insist on a vax certificate at festivals and restaurants and workplaces. I agree with that too. I just want to see that you're able to choose to include measles, yellow fever, etc. added to the passport too, so that it has a further practical use when travelling. Yeah, that's a good point. And someone else says, totally agree that being fully vaccinated should be mandatory, not only for going to big events, but to any events, cafes, restaurants, flights, etc. A lot of love for Hamish Pinkham, who's the founder of Rhythm and Vines. This listener says, he's a gem. So happy to hear an intelligent, realistic view. It's a pandemic, as he said, so hard to make definite plans, but happy to be moving forward. On MIQ, yeah, another lottery. It's the 3rd one, I think, in the virtual lobby. Andrew's got in touch to say, absolutely gutted. Managed to get into the lobby being only 2,039. Yay, Andrew. Yeah, but then this is what happened. Said he couldn't proceed once he'd entered the website because my passport number didn't match match my account. I must have missed off the last digit when entering the lobby. What an inadequate system. Why can't you log in and then get given a place in the queue, thereby eliminating any typing areas? I'm absolutely infuriated and fed up. What a roller coaster of emotions. Anticipating finally seeing family for Christmas and then having that chance snatched away. Oh, Andrew, feel for you there. Yeah, not good. Typos. Right, William Shatner will become the oldest person to have flown in space, for real this time, when he travels aboard Jeff Bezos's Blue Origin rocket next week. The American tech billionaire's travel company has confirmed the 90-year-old Star Trek actor will be blasting off from Texas on October the 12th. The BBC's Richard Hamilton reports.
For anyone not familiar with the original Star Trek series, James T. Kirk was the captain of the Starship Enterprise, built by the Federation of Planets in the 23rd century on a 5-year mission to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before. William Shatner, who played Captain Kirk, is reappearing aboard the Blue Origin's rocket. But his latest mission will be a lot less than 5 years, about 10 minutes, and will take him just beyond the Kármán line, 100 kilometres above sea level, where he's unlikely to encounter any Klingons. In a statement, the Canadian actor, who will be the oldest ever astronaut, said, "I've heard about space for a long time now. I'm taking the opportunity to see it for myself." If successful, he'll also become the first Star Trek actor to reach the final frontier, with the important caveat, while living.
What is it? He's turned the engines off. Completely cold. It'll take 30 minutes to regenerate them.
Ship's outer skin is beginning to heat, Captain. Orbit plot shows we have about 8 minutes left.
Scotty, I can't change the laws of physics.
The ashes of his fellow Star Trek actor James Doohan, who played the chief engineer Scotty, were smuggled aboard the International Space Station in 2008 by a private astronaut and are said to remain under its floor cladding, having orbited the Earth more than 70,000 times. Jeff Bezos took off on Blue Origin's first crewed flight in July from its base in Texas. The company is currently competing in a 21st century space race with Elon Musk's SpaceX and Richard Branson's Virgin Galactic to develop commercial spacecraft, make tourism cheaper, and to boldly go where no billionaires have gone before.
You got to wonder what toll being blasted into space will have on a 90-year-old body. A lot of you getting in touch about teachers and whether they should, it should be mandatory for them to be vaccinated. This person says the idea of compelling teachers to be vaccinated is dangerous and ill-informed. Vaccination does not stop people getting COVID or spreading it. That's an undeniable established medical fact. So why are you so willing to overturn the Bill of Rights? Others have a vastly different opinion. Jilly from Waiheke says, of course teachers should be vaccinated. My grandchildren have asthma and are too young for the vax. Absolutely no question, says Jilly. Is a person who ignores or denies the science about vaccination a fit and proper person to be a teacher? This listener says. And so much more. We'll get to it after 6.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening, I'm Anna Thomas. The police have decided to charge a 63-year-old man with organising a lockdown protest, but haven't said if it's Destiny Church leader Brian Tamaki. Mr Tamaki promoted and spoke at the protest at Auckland Domain on Saturday, attended by about 1,000 people. Jordan Bond reports.
The police say a man has now been summoned to appear in the Auckland District Court next Tuesday in relation to organising the event. The limit for any gathering is 10, which is only for funerals. Brian Tamaki spoke for about 45 minutes at the event and also put out a press release in advance advertising it. The police say the investigation into the matter is continuing and others at the event may also be charged. Mr Tamaki has been approached for comment.
The organiser of the Rhythm and Vines Festival says a COVID-19 vaccine certificate doesn't guarantee the event will happen, but is a step in the right direction. The government has announced that vaccine certificates are likely to be rolled out in November. Hamish Pinkham has told Checkpoint the festival can only take place under Level 1 conditions. He welcomes the concept of a vaccination certificate, but says more detail on enforcement is needed, and a final call on the New Year festival is still weeks away.
I think we'll be having some pretty strong conversations towards the end of November, months out from our event. But, we've got confidence from some of the news today. There's certainly a lot of interest from our punters to make it happen. The government want to make it happen. So we've just got to take each week as it comes. And, getting vaccinated is going to be a big part of that.
Hamish Pinkham says Rhythm and Vines will refund anyone with a ticket who refuses to get vaccinated. A pop-up testing centre at Tarapa Racecourse in Hamilton has helped shorten waiting times for those getting a COVID test. 1,400 tests were done across 4 testing centres today. People were queuing up as early as 5 o'clock this morning. Waikato District Health Board admits it wasn't equipped for the huge demand yesterday, which saw people sitting for hours in their car or being turned away. The region now has 7 testing sites, and people can also book to be tested by their doctor. 6 of today's 24 community cases of COVID-19 are in Waikato. The remaining 18 are in Hamilton. The National Party leader is calling on the government to properly consult other parties before charging ahead with any fundamental changes to electoral law. A sweeping review will consider the voting age, overseas voting, the length of the parliamentary term and the so-called coat-tailing rule. Justice Minister Chris Fafoy says some rules, such as transparency of political funding and Māori voters' ability to switch from the Māori role to the general role, could be in place before 2023, but any big changes would likely go to a referendum. Judith Collins says it's important to get consensus.
What we've seen with this government is a willingness to use majority in Parliament to push through changes. I hope that they will be honest and truthful with their word and that they will properly consult.
Judith Collins says any significant changes would have to be put to referendum. The United Nations Children's Organisation UNICEF has warned that children's mental health could be affected for years to come because of the coronavirus pandemic. UNICEF called for urgent investment in mental health services. The BBC's Imogen Fox reports.
UNICEF estimates that 1 in 7 10 to 19-year-olds is living with a mental health condition, from anxiety to depression to eating disorders. In a survey of 21 countries carried out by UNICEF and Gallup, 20% of 15 to 24-year-olds said they often felt depressed or had little interest in doing things. Mental health disorders among young people were a concern before the pandemic. COVID-19 has amplified the problem.
Kaikoura's Paua fishery, which closed when the 2016 earthquakes disrupted local seabeds, is to reopen following a community-led rebuild. The fishery will reopen for 3 months from December the 1st. Oceans and Fisheries Minister David Parker says the fishery is a shared resource valued by customary, recreational and commercial fishers. Individuals can take just 5 paua per day and 10 or a multi-day trip. David Parker says the wider Kaikoura area will also be reopened to kina fishing from the same date. Scientists say they have successfully treated a patient with severe depression by using what they called a pacemaker for the brain. The implanted device tapped into the brain circuit involved in depressive patterns. Sarah, the first patient to receive the experimental treatment, said it's changed her life.
Hobbies I used to distract myself from suicidal thoughts suddenly became pleasurable again. I was able to make small decisions about what to eat without becoming stuck in a morass of indecision for hours. Now, a year into therapy, the device has kept my depression at bay.
To sport now, and clarity around the draw for the remainder of rugby's national provincial competition won't come until the national body knows the fate of the 3 Auckland-based sides. New Zealand Rugby is still waiting on government approval for players and staff from Auckland, North Harbour and Counties Manukau to move outside the region. NZEI Head of Community Rugby Steve Lancaster says they have a deadline for the final to be played, with or without the Auckland-based teams.
Once we understand the position on the Auckland team's ability to rejoin the competition, then we'll be in a position to confirm both the finals format and the final date, but it won't be any later than the 27th of November.
Warriors fullback Reece Walsh has been fined $5,000 and suspended for 2 games by the NRL after being arrested last week on the Gold Coast in possession of cocaine. The Warriors have said previously they'll also consider their own sanctions. Walsh also faces court charges. And leading New Zealand yacht designer Laurie Davidson has died, aged 94. Davidson was a key member of the Team New Zealand design group from 1987 to 2000, helping design the boats for the team's successful America's Cup Challenge in 1995 and subsequent defence in 2000. And Naomi Osaka has dropped out of the women's top 10 for the first time since winning the 2018 US Open tennis title. The Japanese player, who is now 12th, withdrew from this year's French Open and missed Wimbledon to focus on her mental health. And that's the news.
Tonight on Night's linguist, Dr. Julia de Bress, along with reo teacher and former RNZ broadcaster Ana Tapiata, discuss the media's use of Māori. Tony Stamp samples a movie-inspired album from Sufjan Stevens and Angelo De Augustine. And we begin a new series, 30 Animals That Made Us Smarter, Episode 1, Squid and Self-Healing Materials. Apparently the secret lies in their suckers. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, afternoon news at 7 on RNZ National.
Te reo, irirangi o Aotearoa funded through New Zealand On Air. Now looking at the short forecast from Met Service until midnight tomorrow. For the North Island, fine spells and a few showers with possible thunderstorms and hail from Gisborne and Bay of Plenty to Manawatu, easing this evening and mostly clearing tonight. Areas of low cloud or fog overnight, lifting tomorrow morning with scattered rain spreading south. Marlborough, Nelson, Buller, Westland and Fiordland mostly cloudy with scattered showers. Rain tomorrow with some heavy falls and possible thunderstorms. Canterbury, North Otago and Dunedin partly cloudy with showers inland this afternoon and evening. Drizzle and low cloud about the coast, spreading elsewhere tonight, then clearing tomorrow morning. Scattered rain tomorrow afternoon or evening. Central Otago, Clutha and Southland cloudy periods. A few showers during the afternoons and evenings, both today and tomorrow, with possible thunderstorms and hail. And for the Chatham Islands, partly cloudy. RNZ National. It is 8 minutes past 6 and you're listening to Checkpoint with Lisa Owen.
Kia ora rā e hono mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, called Lisa Owen tēnei. The next couple of weeks could be do or die for some Auckland businesses, with the government's roadmap to Alert Level 2 potentially full of potholes and diversions for them. Customers can't be back in store until Step 2, but even then face coverings and physical distancing will still be required, and food courts and cafes can only operate takeaway services. And the DG of Health has signalled it could take 8 weeks for the city to get down to Level 2. Cabinet will assess the restrictions weekly and decide whether to loosen them further. Joining me now is the boss of the Newmarket Business Association, Mark Knopf-Thomas. Kia ora, Mark. How are businesses feeling about these step downs that were announced yesterday?
Kia ora, Lisa. I think the word I'd say is confused. I've seen many roadmaps in my life and none quite like this one. There are no roads. It's a massive confusion.
What in particular is confusing about it?
I think we had, looking back to the early stages of COVID last year, a very clearly articulated plan, which I think everyone bought into in their so-called, team of 5 million. But what I think was unleashed yesterday is just so many steps, so much talk, but actually what businesses need is some certainty. And I know COVID has rendered this a very uncertain environment, but actually the government can give some certainty by saying, here are some targets, these are the milestones, and here's some financial certainty that you guys can hang on to, knowing that over the next sort of few weeks, as we go down to Alert Level 2, these things are going to continue, especially for the hospitality sector. The hospitality sector across Auckland is literally on its knees, and I just don't think the government fully grasps how dire it is for so many operators. I took part in a call on Sunday with the Hospitality Association, listening to various providers from around Auckland, And it was heart-wrenching. Some of the stories of the guys and the girls who run our cafes, bars and restaurants across Auckland, and the dire straits they find themselves in, and just the lack of understanding from Wellington is just beggars belief. I'm really quite surprised. And I heard Grant Robertson talking this morning saying that, at the moment there's no plans for the wage subsidy to continue through Alert Level 2 for Auckland. And they just don't need that. They need to hear some ongoing support to hospitals specifically.
OK, well, let's look at some of the steps, right? The next one under consideration would allow retail to open in a limited capacity. That will get considered next week. Even under that, like food courts and cafes can open, but you can't actually sit in the cafe. You'd have to take your food away. In that Newmarket area, you've got a lot of businesses that fit into this. Where does it leave them?
I think the retailers, they've got their smarts about them in terms of how they can trade, and they'll make it work for them. And many of our retailers did a digital leap last year and really ramped up their online offering. Not all of them, having said that, but some are able to trade, and they're making it work for them as best they possibly can. But it is not ideal, and I'd say universally everybody is trading and will continue to trade below what they should be trading at until we get back to some kind of alert level 1, whatever that may look like in future. In terms of food providers, we've got a couple of food courts in Newmarket. We've got about 120 cafe, bars and restaurants all up. And at the moment, we've probably got 80% who've chosen not to operate at alert level 3. And even at alert level 2, with the restrictions in place, which won't even come in this week actually for them, but even at that level, the ability to actually make any money is just next to impossible. And with retailers will make it work, but it won't be great. And they will need the support from the government as well to get them through the next few weeks at least.
You got a big mall there, right? It's a big attraction. It draws the crowds in, and I imagine it's pretty expensive to be in that mall. What's happening with rents, do you know?
I'm not privy to negotiations or situations between individual tenants and landlords, but I'd say across the board, our landlords have largely come to the party. It hasn't been quite as it was last year. I think a lot of landlords last year went full on and gave significant support where they could. However, property owners, it's a business as much as having a bar is or having a shop is. So property owners are in business as well, and some of them with retail portfolios, especially in town centres, have found that they've struggled to get tenants to some of their locations. And if you drive down Broadway or go down Queen Street or Ponsonby Road or Parnell Road or K Road, any sort of town centre strip at Auckland or across the country, you're seeing an increase in the number of for-lease retail signs, for-lease retail stores. And so some of these people have not been getting any income from their sites for a long time anyway. So to enforce this new clause on every landlord, I think, really doesn't understand the nature of the diversity of the landlords, and some of their landlords themselves are in a bit of a tight spot, and they're facing some financial hardship themselves, and they also need some support, but they're not getting that at all.
OK, so you talked about Grant Robertson, Finance Minister. We know that at the moment the wage subsidy is available. When Auckland moves to level 2, right, what do you want? Do you want the wage subsidy to continue for a certain period of time when the country is all at level 2? What do you think is fair?
I think the wage subsidy for Auckland needs to continue right up till Christmas, or whatever actually happens, because we've got no milestones to pin to, we've got no timeframes to pin to. But whatever happens as we go down into alert level 2 eventually, and that could be in 3 weeks, best case scenario, it could be in 8 weeks, worst case scenario, or even beyond then, because we don't know what's going to happen with the numbers. But it needs to be dragged right through and through alert level 2 until we get back to alert level 1, whatever that may look like in the future. But I think that, at the moment, the rest of the country at alert level 2 is getting the wage subsidy because Auckland's at alert level 3, and all power to them. Wouldn't want to take it away from the rest of the country because everyone needs the support. But when the whole country is at alert level 2, Auckland misses out on that wage subsidy, and we absolutely need that. It should run all the way through to alert level 1.
Mark, just quickly, when does your kind of pre-season Christmas start, and when do you think we'll get to level 1 knowing what you do?
Well, normally for us, we launch Christmas, and I say that quote unquote, around about the end of the first week or so of November, so maybe the second week of November. And we expect that to be, we'll probably bring it forward a little bit this year because there are some supply chain issues, and you'll have seen all the logistics issues globally with ports of Auckland, and there's now strikes happening at the Port of Sydney and the ports of Melbourne in Australia, which will make it even more difficult to get supplies in. So we're thinking, well, we know Christmas will start largely, I imagine most towns will start around the beginning of November. We want level 1 as soon as possible, but I just don't see that happening. What I see now is just a mishmash of ideas around what it could look like. We need some clarity, we need some milestones. And I don't understand why the government isn't able to say, this is our target. People understand targets. People can work towards targets. People buy into having a target. But there is no target. It's all just this mismatched bit of information we really need to understand with a bit more clarity. I'd like to see level 1 as soon as possible, obviously, but certainly for December, so we can have a really good run at Christmas shopping. That's when our retailers and our hospitality providers can start to try and recoup some of the cash they've lost. We're losing about $15 million a week in Newmarket alone, and that's just one town centre of many in Auckland, so the numbers are huge.
Really appreciate you joining us this evening. That is Newmarket Business Association boss Mark Knopf-Thomas there. A mass vaccination event has dished out nearly 5,000 vaccines to Pacifica in Auckland over the last 4 days. The youth-led drive-through event called Rally Your Village is a big win for Pacific communities who not only received a dose of the Pfizer vaccine but also drove away with practical essentials. The colourful community event is another milestone for Pacifica peoples, helping to reach more youth and their families. RNZ Pacific's Alicia Foon has more.
The power of community, once again on display thanks to a youth-driven mass COVID-19 vaccination event, Rally Your Village. It's been a roaring success. Happening at Auckland's Vodafone Event Centre over the last 4 days, just over 4,500 vaccines were administered. Led by Pacific Health provider South Seas Youth Division Bubblegum Youth, it's part of a 12-week Samoan vaccination campaign. South Seas Chief Executive Silau Vaisola-Sefo says he's extremely proud of the team behind the drive-through event.
Yeah, it's really been driven by youth, designed by youth in the community. And our role really is just supporting them to implement this. So we support them, we provide them with vouchers to enable to engage and mobilise their own communities.
South Seas Healthcare's Youth Development Lead, Sonia Masoe, says despite having some pushback and abuse online by conspiracy theorists, it was all worth it.
Feeling really good, a little bit tired, but overall just really happy with the numbers that came through. It was a huge success. Yeah, we're really stoked with that. And I think it was expected just by how the idea of Rally Your Village, we thought that would really resonate with our people. It's just more people that are, getting vaccinated to ensure that our community is safe.
The Minister of Pacific Peoples is beaming with pride for the youth organisers.
Absolute proud of the leadership the Bubblegum Group made in leading that. And they came up with those ideas of having village competitions and offering the support that they were hearing on the ground from their peers.
He says this event ensures further protection and safety to communities against the virus. Auckland Councillor Josephine Bartley says there's been plenty of great incentives for people to get their hands on.
An awesome event. There was like a steady flow of cars throughout the whole day. There was a mix of people in the cars, mix of ages, and everybody was just happy and vibing. And I think the free KFC had something to do with that as well.
The KFC, just a taste of the $100,000 worth of giveaways. So far, more than 34,000 food parcels, 500 lunch packs, and 2,000 plus petrol vouchers have been distributed. Silau Vaisola-Sefo says the community-driven approach is key to its success. He says it's about taking people on a journey before and after they get the vaccine.
In the last 3 days, we've had those coordinators on site. It's like the telephone, that model where they're on site dialing people to come through. That's what's worked. It's that model, the telephone model. Really awesome. Honestly, that's the success of this. That's what I'm saying. It's a community-driven.
Josephine Bartley says the strategic telethon approach has led to a collective community spirit.
What the key was they had a hub of people ringing the sports groups, the church groups and the youth groups from those groups. So they had their own coordinator based in the centre and they were constantly ringing. So there was almost like a competition vibe going on to get your group registered and vaccinated.
The event has been extended and will also run again tomorrow.
Well, as you'll be aware, from 11:59pm tonight, there are new rules coming in, loosening a bit of Alert Level 3 in Auckland. Now, we desperately wanted to get someone to come on the program to explain these rules to you, because a lot of you are asking questions. You know, can I train with my sports team? Is it true that I can have a boot camp? Can there be more than me and my trainer? Can different households mix for that? And we wanted some clarification about that. We asked the government if there was a minister who could come on and answer these questions. No, sadly, no one was available. We also went to the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, and unfortunately, they couldn't provide anyone to talk to us either. But we did submit some written examples to them, and they've just got back to us with some of the rules, which you may find interesting. So let's walk through a couple of the examples that could help you. Right? It says, from 11:59pm tonight, people should continue to act sensibly and responsibly, and we are encouraging people to use this easing of restrictions to catch up with close friends and whānau in small groups. Right. The first thing to clarify is exercise. Outdoor-only exercise classes can take place with up to a maximum of 10 people. Participants do not have to be from 1 or 2 households only, but they will need to maintain 2 metres physical distancing and remain outdoors at all time. People cannot use indoor bathrooms or changing facilities. The instructor is included in the 10 people able to gather outdoors. Right? So if you got that, 10 people, including an instructor, you don't all have to be from the same household, or 2 households even, but you got to stay 2 metres apart. Next one, the maximum number of people for organised recreational activity who can gather is 10 people, from as many as 10 bubbles. I'm going to repeat that for clarity. Maximum number of people for organised recreational activity can gather 10 people from as many as 10 bubbles. Gathering must be outdoors and the bubbles must maintain physical distancing at all times, so cannot include contact sport. Again, as in step 1, we are encouraging people to reconnect with their close friends and whānau. Visitors cannot go into your house at all. If you have visitors, they can meet in your garden or in an outdoor public space. The important thing is that your gathering of 10 people is outdoors to reduce the risk of the virus transmitting. Here is another key thing. This includes walking through a house to access the backyard or use of the bathroom. You are not allowed to do that. If you cannot get to your outside area from outside, you can't have people walk through the house to get there, and they are not allowed to use your toilet. Same for children coming on play dates. They can't use your loo. And in terms of hairdressing, hairdressers cannot operate at all during this time, they say, even if outside. All businesses in Alert Level 3 have to provide goods or services in a contactless way. Hairdressers and other close contact businesses will be able to start opening at step 3. On the issue of playdates also, we asked if you could have a different child come to your house every day. They have said people are asked to act responsibly by keeping their contacts to a minimum, keep track of who they are seeing and follow the health guidelines, and the kids cannot come into the house to use the toilet or access any outdoor play areas. Hope that clarifies some things for you. We will get that up on our website as soon as possible so you can check out those rules and regulations in more detail. The risk of travellers bringing COVID means some mainlanders are accepting being stuck at level 2 despite no cases there. The South Island is facing more time under alert level 2 while Auckland is gradually eased out of lockdown. Down south, the only difference is the 100-person cap on hospitality venues has been lifted. Tess Brunton has been in Oamaru.
With alert level 2 restrictions in place, Oamaru's Victorian precinct isn't the hive of activity it would usually be during the school holidays. Despite that, Oamaru resident Greg Nikoloff stands by the elimination strategy and wants it to stay.
I think elimination is the best long-term strategy for the country as a whole over the longer term, because we're in the middle of a long war. This is not something that's going to be over by Christmas time or just shortly afterwards. So we need to plan for not just now, but also, for the next year or even longer.
He says it could be useful if the South Island had its own border, given how long it's been since a community case down here.
But the reality is we're only one plane flight away from COVID in the South Island. So someone from Auckland could get on a plane with COVID and bring it here within an hour. Yeah, you could put borders at the ferries and that would be reasonably effective, so it would be quite easy to police. The airlines, the airports are the tougher one to do because most people move around through airplanes these days. So yeah, that's a lot harder to put in.
He'd like to be in level 1, but only if it can be done safely. Dunedin resident Leah isn't sure the 3-step roadmap for easing Auckland's lockdown is the right way forward.
I think they're trying to strike a fine balance between what business needs and what maybe the people need, and also between the people who are getting a bit frustrated and the people that are COVID fearful. So they're trying to strike a nice balance, I think. I'm not sure I necessarily agree with that.
She's happy to stay at level 2 and says that should be the way forward for the moment, unless travel is stopped between the two islands. While she's vaccinated, Leah doesn't want those who choose not to be to face consequences.
So I'll be very disappointed if, to enjoy our own country, people have to prove that they're vaccinated. And it also scares me that people might lose their jobs if they don't choose to be vaccinated. I'm not talking about the people that can't, because obviously they're not part of this scenario, but those who choose to for whatever reason, I would hate to see them being shut in their homes for the rest of their lives.
Manawatu resident Tony isn't too surprised by the government's roadmap.
I don't think they had too many options. I think people in Auckland have had enough of it. So I think it's a clever move, but whether it works, who knows?
Delta has changed how he views the government's strategy.
Elimination is something we won't get, but as long as everybody gets vaccinated, that'll be our best bet.
The government is due to review their roadmap restrictions next week.
The pandemic has prompted many people to flee the big cities and move to coastal locations, but now one man in Australia is hoping to lure residents somewhere a bit more remote. The ABC's Ali Grounds has the story.
7 years ago, farmer Max Jones took a punt on swapping sheep for real estate, buying a commercial property in his hometown of Condobolin in central west New South Wales.
It was a good news story for the town. The businesses that went into them have really flourished, and so it was really, really great.
In January, he embarked on a 7,000-kilometre road trip to pick his next town to invest in. Coastal Queensland spots like Cairns were on the cards, but instead he chose Charleville in the state's southwest, population 3,300.
Obviously my preference is for country towns because they've just got that hometown feeling about them. There's good people and everyone looks after each other.
He bought a 2,800 square metre building that had been sitting empty for some time, and he's turning it into 11 commercial spaces and 15 residential properties.
Nobody likes to look at empty, abandoned spaces. It's very common in a lot of main streets, and I mean people, their first impressions driving down the main street, if it's just empty and abandoned, can be pretty negative.
Max Jones hopes the development will rejuvenate Charleville and get people to move there. One of his new tenants has done just that. Last month, hairdresser Kimberly Newman and her husband packed up their life in Brisbane and headed 8 hours west in search of a change of pace.
Wanting a bit more simplicity and wanting to slow down, start sort of seeing the benefits of all of our years of hard work, maybe becoming the man instead of working for the man.
And let's get some of your feedback before we head off on electoral reform. Ingrid from Gisborne says, yes, funding political parties makes a level playing field instead of money controlling our countries. Elections every 4 years, lived in the UK, 5 years is too long, says Ingrid. What's the weather like there in Turanganui, a Kiwi today, Ingrid? Robin says, 4 years, please. Now, isn't there a majority every time we're asked about this? Also, medical, educational, all should be vaccinated, says Robin. Gary says, I believe that state funding of political parties is a fair way to go. On vaccinating teachers, this person says, at our school we have a staff of 8, 4 are not willing to get vaccinated. Bring on mandatory vaccination for educators. Mike says, when my grandson goes back to school on October 18th, I'll be asking the question, is his teacher vaccinated? That's all we've got time for this evening. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi a pōpō tomorrow from 5 a.m. First up, talks to vaccine hesitant Aucklanders about why they're refusing to get the jab.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. An event promoter says the vaccination certificate is a step in the right direction, but large-scale events will not go ahead until alert level 1. The Waikato District Health Board has opened more testing centres to deal with the increased demand for COVID-19 swabs. The police say other people may face charges following an anti-lockdown protest after announcing at least one man will appear in court next Tuesday. The public are being asked to help police with information after the death of a man in Otorohanga on Saturday night. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Pacific Waves, delving deeper into the major Pacific stories of the week in Aotearoa, New Zealand, the region and the world. I bring you interviews with Pacific newsmakers, experts and commentators in their fields, as well as up-to-date coverage from our talented team here at RNZ Pacific and our correspondents on the ground in the region. Pacific Waves, 8:15 weeknights on RNZ National.
Kia ora, Koroi. Love those drums. Koroi, of course, will be part of Nights with me, Brian Crump. His part starts at about 8:15. My part starts after the news at 7. My guests after 7 are linguist Julia Debres, and she's bringing in with her Ana Tapiata, who used to work for RNZ, and they'll be talking about the use of te reo in the New Zealand media, which is pretty topical given we've just had Māori Language Week. That's coming up after 7. Later in this half hour, a bit of audio that's been getting a lot of clicks. An interview that Jim Mora had with the American author Evan Osnos about the United States of America. Not completely broken, not a complete basket case, he argues. A little bit of that coming your way after tonight's edition of The Detail, which focuses on a remarkable story. That's the story of the bloke who went into the bush with his kids for 17 days, no sign until they came back out again.
The mystery of Marukopa has been solved.
Something we've not had much of in recent times is the tiny King Country settlement of Marukopa welcomed news a family of 4 missing for 17 days are safe and well.
It's all good. Bring the babies home.